Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Umi Qalzum. I'm from PBIB Class B, and this is the ninth assignment of Psycholinguistics. And the material is about language acquisition among adults. So, as a second language learner, Hanani and Grandman's 1977 study provides insights that resonate with my journey of learning English. Initially, much like Fatma, I relied on memorized phrases and routines to communicate. Expression like could you help me?" or "I don't understand" became my go-to tools in conversation. At the time, I didn't always understand the structure of these phrases. They were simply sounds I repeated in the appropriate context. These routines were crucial for building my confidence and enabling basic interactions. As I progressed, I began noticing patterns in the language through exposure to authentic interactions such as listening to native speaker or participating in discussion. This gradual awareness allowed me to construct sentences of my own, moving beyond rote memorization. I started experimenting with new combinations of words to express unique ideas, even when my grammar wasn't always perfect. This reflects the process of creative construction that Hanani and Gradman observed in Fatma's syntactic development. In my experience, the findings of the study underline how adults can successfully acquire a second language by building on routines and gradually developing creativity in language use. It highlights the importance of practice, interaction, and immersion for fostering meaningful and adaptive communicating skills. And the question number two is Alice R. 1997 emphasized that the computational model explains three stages that occur in human mind when acquiring language. What do you know of the model? And explain your answer in detail and support with example. So, the computational model shows how language acquisition progresses systematically, moving from passive recognition or intake to active production output. For instance, when I started learning English, I first memorized phrases from classroom lessons, intake, gradually internalized them through repetition and practice integration, and eventually used them naturally in conversation output. This process highlights the importance of consistent exposure, practice, and application in mastering the second language. And the first stage is intake. In this initial stage, adults receive the process uh, adults receive and process language input, storing it in their short-term memory. This input, referred to as intake, consists of words, phrases, or grammatical patterns encountered through listening or reading. For example, a learner hears the phrase "Can I have water?" during a conversation. They store this phrase in their short-term memory as a recognizable pattern. And the second one is integration stage. The intake from short-term memory is then transferred to long-term memory, where it becomes part of the learner knowledge of the second language. This involves processing and internalizing the linguistic elements, turning them into usable knowledge. Then the output stage. Finally, the learner uses the knowledge stored in long-term memory to produce during verbal communication. This stage involves retrieving and combining linguistic elements to express thoughts and ideas. For example, in a restaurant, the learner actively uses the phrase "Can I have water?" to request a drink, adapting it to the context, and producing meaningful speech. This computational model shows how language acquisition progresses systematically, moving from passive recognition to active production. For instance, when started learning English, I first memorized I first memorized phrases from classroom lessons, and then uh, number three is according to Krashen, 1972. Adults go through five stages of language development when acquiring a second language. These stages are reflected in my experience as a second language learner over the past 4 years. The first one is pre-production stage. This is the silent period where learners focus on listening, memorizing word, and practicing pronunciation without actively speaking. I remember spending my early months learning basic words and phrases like hello, thank you, and good morning without constructing sentence. And the second, early production stage. At this stage, learners began to produce one or two words, simple phrases, or short sentences. Uh, though often with errors. For me, this happened after about 6 months. I could say phrases like I go school or you help me. These were grammatically incorrect, but they allowed me to communicate basic ideas. And the third is speech emergence stage. Here, learners use around 3,000 words and began forming short sentences or questions. Though grammatical errors still occur, I experienced this stage in my second year where I could say like I don't like this movie because it's boring. Through my grammar was far from perfect. This stage also marked in the beginning of my active reading and writing practices. And the fourth is intermediate fluency stage. After about 1 year, I entered the immediate fluency stage, where I could use around 6,000 words and form complex sentences. For example, I could express thoughts like I believe this book is interesting because it explains history in detail. Despite being able to communicate effectively, I still made occasional mistakes, especially with more complex grammar structures. And the last is advanced fluency stage. Now, after 4 years, I feel closer to advanced fluency. I can comfortable hold discussion, deliver presentations, and write essays with minimal errors. For instance, I recently gave a presentation on cultural communication using accurate grammar and vocabulary. While I still occasionally make mistakes due to mental slips, I can self-correct, showing my grasp of the language. Thank you. That's all from me. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.